What's up, it's Thrax. I'm going to be going over a quick video on just how to set up your ATAS, or how I set up my ATAS and my cluster settings to get it to look like this. In my last video that I created in regards to my footprint charts and my footprint setups that I use to trade, I was getting a handful of comments just asking how to set it up. So I'll go over it in this video for you guys, and just to make it easy, I am going to include the actual CTS template file for ATAS down in the description below so you can download it. And after you do download it, to make it really simple, you can just go to settings, templates, import, and then you would select the Thrax cluster settings, and then you can import it and your chart will then automatically look like this. But I will be going over the settings a little bit more in depth, just so that you know what to change, or you know how you can change it just to get it to show what you're actually looking for. And I'll go over the indicators I use on ATAS itself when I'm trading on this platform. So to get to the actual settings, if you didn't know, you would just right click, you go to settings, and you have a couple different settings here. You have visual settings, cluster settings, your trading settings, and then templates. So visual settings are just things like the background and showing current price and colors and things like that. You can mess around with that on your own. I'm not really going to go over that in this video. What I am going to go over is what you guys were requesting, which is the cluster settings. So specifically for the cluster settings that I use, you have two main things here. You have content and you have mode. In the content, what I'm always looking at is I'm looking bid times ask. And so essentially what bid times ask is going to show us is when you do zoom in, that's when it's going to show the bid on the left side, the ask on the right side, and you're reading it the same way that I went over in the last video. So you're reading it diagonally, not horizontally, if you are reading the numbers. So bid times ask is going to be the content that we want inside of the candles. And then there's a couple different things you can actually do here for the mode. So in the previous video, I did have people asking me how I got the POC to only show up on the bid or on the ask. If you wanted to do that, the mode that you need to be on is bid ask ladder. So if you see when I changed to bid ask ladder, now you have the POC only on one side of the candle, whether it's the ask or the bid. I actually don't use this anymore. I recently have been using the volume profile. The reason why I use the volume profile, just so you know, is because when you see these shaded areas or these clouds, this is where the most amount of volume obviously was traded in the candle. It's just easier to visualize, in my opinion, with the volume proportion rather than using the bid ask ladder. And I can still look at delta and look at the numbers themselves to understand where more of that volume was happening, whether it was on the bid or it was on the ask. So recently I've just been using it this way, where instead of it being on only one side, it's showing just the actual level where the POC was for the candle itself. You can do it with the bid ask ladder if you want to. That's how I had it in the other video, but I no longer do that. I do it now where it's on the same level. So in the color scheme, this is what's going to be showing up inside the actual candle. What I typically keep it on is volume proportion, because I'm trying to understand within the candle where majority of the volume was actually traded in the candle. So in my case, I am using volume proportion with the volume profile. If you wanted to use something else, you absolutely could. For example, if you want to use the bid ask ladder and you wanted to see whether, you know, the most amount of volume or the POC was on the bid or the ask, and instead of looking at volume, you wanted to look at delta, you can do that and it will shade in the candles differently. This is how I had it on the video where you guys watched last time in regards to my reversal setup that I look for in footprint. Like I said, I did change it, so you know, I'm looking at volume profile and I'm not looking at delta, because I have delta down here that I can pay attention to. I don't need to look at it within the actual candle itself for the specific type of trading that I'm doing. So I just keep it on volume proportion just so that I can see these clouds even when I'm kind of zoomed out. So after that, essentially what you're doing now is you're just changing the colors of what's inside the candle. So now for, volume proportion, if you're on this, the main color being blue, that's when the cloud of volume here is blue. If you want it to be a different color, you can change it. And then down here, maximum level. This is how you actually get the POC on your chart. So you would choose volume because the point of control is volume based. We're looking at volume. If you wanted to look at something else, like let's say you had this as negative delta, this is not the POC. This is something completely different. So if you want to look at the POC, you're going to be using volume. Now it's going to show you where the most amount of volume was traded within that specific candle. Doesn't matter what time frame it is. This chart's on a 3-minute time frame. This chart's on a 5-minute, and I also have a 15-minute and a hourly candle on another chart that's on a different screen. After that, what I do is I enable bid, ask, imbalance settings. So essentially what this is when there is a certain amount of buyers than sellers or sellers than buyers, we're looking for imbalances within the candle itself so that we can get an idea of who's in control and where direction is going. And the way that I do that, or the way that you would do it, is you would essentially enable it. And when you enable it, you can select the colors. Because I have a darker background, I keep it white. And so essentially what that looks like is when you have more sellers, see here there were more sellers aggressively hitting the bid than buyers hitting the ask. Because there was an imbalance here, I basically have it showing up in a bold font. And that bold font, I want it to be white. If you have a different background, maybe you want it to be a different color. And if that's the case, then you're going to change it here. So you would change it in this area. The imbalance rate is important because this is essentially a percentage. You can keep it to 300 or 400 or even 500. Personally, I keep it at 400%. So I'm looking for 400% imbalances on either side of the bid and the ask. So that means like if there were 4 times as many buyers and sellers, it's going to show up in bold. If there's 4 times as many sellers than buyers, it's going to show up in bold. And then I do have a volume filter here. So I don't want to have like a super low volume candle that only has a couple contracts traded at each level and then is then showing a bunch of imbalances, because those don't really matter. What I am looking for is I'm looking for when there is volume in the candle that essentially the imbalances that are 4 times the other side of the bid and the ask, I am looking for imbalances then. So for example, when we have it filtering out 10, so it needs at least 10 contracts to count towards a imbalance, and then it needs to be 4 times the amount. So if we look at it, like let's say in this candle, so you see how we have 126 to 0, 122 to 10, 36 to 1, 35 to 1, 32 to 0, 42 to 0, 18 to 0. This is what's showing up imbalances on my screen. And I use these as sometimes areas of support and resistance, depending on if it was sellers or buyers. And I actually have an indicator for that, which I'll go over in a second. But that is really about it for the cluster settings. It's pretty simple, although I know it's easier if I do make a video on it so that you guys can just set it up really quick. So just a quick recap. The cluster settings, the content, I have it bid times ask. Volume profile is the mode that I'm on currently that you're looking at on my screen. If you want it to have the POC only on either the bid or only on the ask, then you're going to use the bid ask ladder. And then the color scheme below, I keep it on volume. If you don't want to look at volume for whatever reason and you wanted to look at delta or heat map by trades or whatever, then go ahead and change it right there. And then again down here, you want to make sure your maximum level is volume. That's how you're going to get the POC. You can change it to whatever color you want. I currently have it as yellow because I have a darker background. And then I just enable the imbalances and I make sure that it's a 400% or 400% imbalance rate. So that's 4 times as many buyers or sellers, 4 times as many sellers than buyers. Now the last thing I'll go over is I will go over just the indicators that I have. So the first one that I have is the stacked imbalance. So if you go into a toss and you wanted to add an indicator, you would essentially just right click on the chart, go to indicators, you can search up here, stacked imbalance, you would select it. Now once you are in stacked imbalance, this is where I put the same settings, 400 for the imbalance ratio, 10 for the needed volume, and then I change the colors. And line till touch means that this is essentially going to stay here until price runs through it, and then it's no longer going to continue through the rest of the chart, just to keep the charts clean, because I only use these once. Once price runs through them, I don't typically use them again. But if you want it to go all the way across the chart, you would just uncheck this box. So then what happens is every single time that there is an imbalance created on either side, it then creates these boxes. So if it's sellers, then it's going to be red. If it's buyers, then it's going to be blue. And you can see them here on my charts, how they are now. And then you can change the colors, or you can change the opacity of them, or whatever you want to do. And then something else I look at is I have a bar timer here. This is very simple and self-explanatory. It's just how much time is left in this actual 3-minute candle, or if I'm on a different chart like a 15-minute, it's how much time is left on that candle. I always pay attention to it just because time is important when it comes to trades. I just like to pay attention to it. You don't need it here, but I have it here. If you download my template, you're going to have it too, but you can always delete it if you want. And then you would just change the colors and whatnot inside of the settings. And then the last one that I have, which is important, which a lot of you probably were asking about, is down here at the bottom where I'm showing delta and volume per candle. The way that you would do that is, again, you would go into the indicators and you would search up something called cluster statistic. When you open up cluster statistic, you're going to have rows. So if you really wanted to, you can show how many bid, how many ask, you know, the trade count, the session volume, the volume per second, whatever. I only have 2 of these checked because it's the only ones I care about looking at, and it's delta and volume for the candle. And then when you come down to visualization, this is essentially how you're going to be looking at the colors. So if you wanted to make, like, let's say your candlesticks aren't blue and red like mine, and they're green and red, then you could just change the ask color to green, keep the bid color as red, and then your chart essentially down here, when there's more buyers, it's going to be a more vibrant color, or more sellers, it's going to be a more vibrant color. If it's more neutral or kind of balanced within the candle where there's not a huge delta difference, then it's going to be kind of low opacity. So like, as you can see, when down here we were at minus 735 for delta, it's a brighter color, minus 1000 brighter color. When we're over here at 0, it's essentially blank. It's like low opacity, it's dark, it's not very vibrant. And then again, when we come up in numbers to negative 552 on the delta for this 3-minute candle, then it's going to become more vibrant, so it's easier to see. And the same goes for volume. So volume is the second statistic I'm looking at. I have it as gray. You can change it to whatever color you want, but the more volume there is, the brighter the gray is going to be. The less volume there is, the less gray there's going to be. It's just another way to kind of visualize what's happening without having to read all of these numbers. Choosing the colors is important because you don't always have to read every individual number, as it can become a lot when you're trying to trade, day trade, intraday, especially if you're like scalping or something, or taking quick moves like 15, 20, 25 point moves. You don't want to be reading a bunch of numbers and like trying to overcomplicate things. So I use a lot of this stuff just as like colors, right? So if I'm looking at this, I can easily see the POC. I can easily see where there were sellers. I could see where buyers started to step in. I don't really have to read the numbers. I can see the clouds, where the volume was at. I don't have to read the numbers. If I do care to read the numbers and start looking at the imbalances and how much volume there actually was or how many trades there were, I can do that if I really want to, but I don't need to. So yeah, I mean, that's essentially it. So we're currently just looking at the bid and ask. We're looking at volume. We're looking at the POC of the candle, and then we're looking at delta and volume down here below. Couple indicators. Pretty quick video. I just kept getting comments on that last video asking for me to make a video about the settings. So here it is. It's pretty simple. You can learn more about it if you actually go to ATAS's YouTube channel. They're great. They have a lot of educational content on how to actually use their platform. But in case you don't want to do that, you can just copy my template. You can download it in the description below and then just upload it into the templates here in your ATAS platform. And again, if you don't have ATAS, you can go ahead and click the link in the description below and you can get a 14-day free trial just to mess around with this. They have a great replay mode, probably the best that I've ever seen. It's real time and you can see all the orders coming in, and you can even see previous DOM levels if you trade looking at the DOM. They allow level 2 playback as well. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask me in the comment section below. Hopefully this video helped you, especially if you were asking me for my settings in ATAS. Here it is. And I will catch you guys next time I make a video. Peace.